Mr. Brown Mokhotsi sends a WhatsApp to Vusimuzi, Cat Matlala, and it reads as follows: "The task team that came to your house and harassed you have been dissolved. As we speak, they are bringing all docket to Sabia."
The reason why Lieutenant General Sabia and the Minister, Brown Mokhotsi and Ket Matlala, wanted to disband the team. There was no any other motive but to prevent the investigation against the cartels.
I feel oppressed, Chair. Even the same letter, this letter, comes from the National Commissioner's office.
The Madlanga Commission very much in sharp focus once again. It's topical and it starts right now. A very good evening to South Africa and those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman and this is It's Topical. We welcome our panel tonight as well as our live studio audience. You're going to get a glimpse of them soon. Looking forward to our interactions with them in a short while. Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, suspended Deputy National Police Commissioner for crime detection, putting his side of the story before the Madlanga Commission. Now, another prominent figure in this probe is Vusimuzi Cat Matlala and the questions of whether there's an untoward relationship between the two. Context. During testimony before the ad hoc committee, Matlala said he met Sabia about 3 times, one of which was back in 2024 to talk about a kidnapping case of his friend. That's Matlala's friend, right? He said Sabia called him and asked him questions about the kidnapping. Sabia says he categorically denies ever receiving or soliciting any form of gratification, inducement, benefit or kickback from Matlala or any other person. Now, what about the political killings task team? Defending himself around this issue, General Sabia said, among other things, right, that the complaint against him is not a bona fide complaint, meaning not genuine or in good faith. He goes on to say that it is contrived, selective in its focus, and premised on an incomplete account of the events leading to the disestablishment of the PKTT. Question: after months of testimony and cross-examination, how close are we to knowing the truth? It also comes at a time when we heard from the current police minister, Feroz Kachalia, saying while the national trends for most violent and property crimes continue to head in the right direction, crime remains unacceptably high and continues to devastate many lives and communities. I don't have to tell you that. You've experienced it firsthand, some of you. Also, remember what the president said in his State of the Nation address. Organized crime is now the most immediate threat to our democracy. So the question then becomes, how do we process what we are hearing from the Madlanga Commission over the past couple of months with what we heard around the third quarter crime stats announced this week? What about the notable increase in the murder of police officials? We're told, listen to this, almost 80% of the 23 police officials who lost their lives were off duty. How do we protect those who protect us? We need answers to all aspects of the criminal justice system. It leads us to the question of the week, and we ask you, did Lieutenant General Sibiya's testimony clarify matters for you, or did it leave you with more questions than answers? Let us know at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up. All right, before we get to our discussions with our live studio audience as well as our guests, I want to hear from police generals, including Sabia, on why they believe the political killings task team was disbanded. And the big question is, who is to blame?
Mr. Brown Mokgotsi sends a WhatsApp to Vusimuzi, Matlala, and it reads as follows, I quote, "I have arranged a meeting for Sabia and the minister. They must have a solution." And he follows another message. "The task team that came to your house and harassed you have been dissolved. They got the letter on Monday. As we speak, they are bringing all docket to Sabia."
Now one understand the reason why Lieutenant General Sabia and the minister, Brown Mokgotsi and Matlala, wanted to disband the team. There was no any other motive but to prevent the investigation against the cartels in Gauteng that are involved in murder, drugs, and so on.
I feel oppressed, Chair.
No, feel free to comment.
I feel oppressed in a sense that this is an official process. It's not a private process, it's an official process coming from the minister to the national commissioner to me. We are all in it. Now, when the national commissioner chose to do something with General Khumalo, which he never alerted me to. He never said to me, leave it, I will do it, and then went and did it somewhere with General Khumalo when I don't know. And I kept on communicating and doing things, hoping that I'm doing that what the National Commissioner also expects me to do. And then in the meantime, later, it transpired that, he was doing his own thing. But what pains me the most is the fact that even the same letter that I know is going around in circle, but even the same letter, this letter, comes from the National Commissioner's office. Now, although I own it because I had to sign it, it just kills me to see how the commissioners are rejecting it, that it comes from the National Commissioner's office. It was prepared from the National Commissioner's office. Even though I signed it, I accept that.
Those comments actually tease up the discussion nicely for us. We'll get to that now famous acronym PKTT in a short while. We'll pick it apart and get you some context in terms of what was said, but more importantly, what wasn't said. We'll get to that in a short while. But before that, let's go to our regular Word on the Street feature. Took to various streets of Johannesburg seeking diverse insights and perspectives on this topic, and this is what people had to say.
So far, I think it's been very informative. The information that's coming out of there is obviously enlightening to all of us as South Africans. I'm very pleased to hear that it has been done. I think it's important that it comes out.
We are expecting all those that have been implicated to be held accountable. We don't want commissions after commissions. We have been having so many commissions. At least this one, it must be the last one.
As a citizen, we are very anxious and we are concerned. And actually, things are so bad. But, what we are asking ourselves is, when will this thing end? And when it ends, will there be consequence management?
Corruption we're facing in our country these days is too much, and it's affecting especially our youth these days. Many things are going on, and then there's no response actually from the government side. Like you can see, many things are happening around South Africa. Nothing has been done actually, especially on the police side and everything.
It helps us because it reveals all these things. We didn't know that the money is just going to the places that we don't know. Going to Limpopo, while supposed to save the people of Ekurhuleni, through Matlala and other guys and so on and so on. But I want to say thanks for Madlanga Commission. Thanks very much. Thanks and thanks again.
All right, we really appreciate your thoughts on this matter. Let's get the discussion underway. We've got our live studio audience here. We're going to get to them in a short while. But let me introduce my guest to you in studio. We have Thabo Masumbuka, who is a senior legal practitioner. Thabo, thank you very much indeed for coming on. Also joining us virtually is Mike Bolhuis, security and investigations expert. Mike, good to have your better mind on the program. I'm going to tap into that in a short while, get some perspective. Thabo, I'm going to most of the time be spending on this side because that's my wheelhouse and we feel comfortable here, but it's about people getting the answers to the questions that they need, right? And context is always important. But let's tee it up for the viewers as well. General Sibiya, Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, under heavy cross-examinations by some standards, right? Talk to us about what your thoughts were, how he held up in terms of the forensic questioning.
Good evening, PH. I think what we need to start to establish is that commissions of inquiries, unlike courts of law, operate on a different evidentiary burden. They are, in particular, fact establishment forums. In other words, they don't work on a bar beyond any reasonable doubt. They work on the balance of probabilities, all right? So what happens...
So break that down for us.
On a balance of probabilities is a standard of proof that is lesser than the beyond a reasonable doubt that works in court, where the state has got to prove its case beyond any reasonable doubt, above any reasonable suspicions and doubts. So here, all this commission needed to do was just to establish what really happened. And they work on a principle of impartiality. So in other words, they have to always, as stated in the principles of natural justice, give the other side the chance to explain themselves. And this, what we saw this week, was exactly that. Where DNC, Deputy National Commissioner, was given an opportunity to actually explain what happened. First 2 days, he was giving his own account of what happened. In effect, what he was trying to do, he was trying to explain to the public and the commission what really happens behind the scene, in the office, how communications work, the modus operandis. But for all intents and purposes, that's neither here nor there. Because a case has been laid, because what it doesn't tell us whether or not the police system and the leadership is being infiltrated. And what General Mkhwanazi on the 6th of July, if you listen to those that press conference and the evidence subsequent thereto, he established a fact that yes, there are ordinary workings in the police, but hold on, there's what you as the public don't know. There are people behind the scenes who are actually infiltrating the leadership of the police. But here's an interesting point. General Mkhwanazi tried to cast aspersion on how, General Sibiya tried to cast aspersion on how the evidence was obtained. In fact, he went into great detail trying to discredit the credibility of the WhatsApp evidences. He actually went as far as suggesting that what if the evidence that's before the commission in South Africa is actually been manipulated. But that's neither here nor there. That's for a court of law to establish. Commissions of inquiries are not, for all intents and purposes, interested in those technical modus operandi.
But it is important because it gets to a point where you're trying to understand what he's trying to put forward, his strategy going forward, and trying to explain his side of the story. Mike, the Lieutenant General will be back tomorrow, I understand, on Monday, which should likely be his last day in terms of cross-examination before the commission. But I wonder, what's your thoughts in terms of how he's holding up and the evidence that he's putting forward?
Yeah, he's very clearly shows his colors and his character. He's devious. He's circumventing and he's not telling the truth. As my learned colleague has said, he could stand up and say, you know what, this is my position, this is my rank, I messed up. This is what I've done wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I take responsibility. I'm a leader. I have to change. I must protect and serve. I must be honest and transparent. Here's all my evidence. Here's all the infiltrations that he's referring to. Here's any and everybody that did anything wrong. Here's what I did wrong. here's what I've stolen back. I will be absolute for a forensic polygraph. He won't do that. And if you want to prove your innocence, this is what you do. None of the others has done it and won't do it. And this is what we see now with Sabia.
Is
There's
that
more.
needed, Mike?
Much more.
In terms of a commission, what Thabo was trying to explain and the difference between the court process and a commission, is that needed at this stage, do you think?
Yes, it's needed because you need to prove yourself if you're beyond reproach.
Right.
You need to show your character. You need to show your willingness. Look how we've seen with all the other criminals that has appeared, and I call them criminals because, I mean, that's why they're there. They are already exposed. They already incriminated themselves, and now they're all incriminating each other. There's no honor amongst criminals, and they're all throwing each other under the bus, and they cannot lie. They're trying, but they say the most stupid things that I've ever heard. So yes, it is necessary. And this is the forerunner to when it goes to court, obviously. But they have to be transparent, and they haven't shown that.
Right.
They haven't shown honesty. They haven't shown real character other than being devious.
That's how Mike Bolhuis has seen it. Let's see what the Madlanga Commission has to say with regards to the final report. Let's bring in the better minds now. There's a lot of brain power here, by the way, today. Among them, law students and general folks who want to weigh in terms of what they heard at the commission this week. We have students from UKZ, not UKZ, and UJ, as well as VIT. So I'll introduce them as we go. And let's start with you, sir. Where are you from? And what's your comment with regards to what you've heard in terms of testimony? Your name firstly.
So my name is Brian Ngoma. I'm a master's student at VIT University. And I think what the Madlanga Commission and everything we've heard from it thus far represents is just how endemic and wide-ranging the crisis of corruption is in this country. We obviously started, and this centers around corruption and infiltration within the police force. But what we're seeing the effects it has on our health industry, right? We're seeing the effects it has on so many other facets of the state's ability to provide the services it needs to provide for the majority of South Africans. So I think beyond everything, what this represents is something both deeply enlightening but also deeply unsettling about the state of South Africa as of right now.
It's given many communities pause, right? Ma'am, your name and where you from?
My name is Andiswa Nkosi. I'm currently doing my 4th year at the University of Johannesburg, and I'm from the Mpumalanga province.
Right. So I guess, what you're learning in class is being given practical expressions on a daily basis from what you're seeing and hearing from the commissions, the Madlanga Commission. From what you've heard, how does it all tie up? How are you processing it?
I think one thing that has been of main concern with me concerning the Madlanga Commission is the effectiveness of the criminal justice system. As we're usually taught in criminal procedure, it is very crucial to have an effective criminal justice system. So if you're going to have a situation whereby there are certain instances that threaten that criminal justice system, then it'll deter public confidence. The people of the public per se will no longer have confidence within the criminal justice system. They'll be like, oh, nothing is done within the criminal justice system. There's a lot of corruption. There's political interference. So they resort to a situation whereby they take matters to their own hands.
Mike, trust in the criminal justice system is key. If you don't have trust with those who are protecting you, then it's fruitless, right? We need to understand or experience some sort of comfort when dealing with police officers and those prosecutors, etc., etc. But at this stage, what sort of picture is being painted from the Madlanga Commission, from the ad hoc committee, rather?
Well, it is shocking, and it's as the youngsters have said there, and I can prove it to you that the country is in its worst situation ever. You will not easily get a person that says, you know what? I have peace and quiet. I don't have burglar bars. I'm not concerned. I'm not worried about my kids. I'm cool, calm, and collected. I trust the police. You know, my police station, they just look after us constantly. I trust my municipality. You know, everything is good. There's no potholes. We have no water and electricity problems. I trust this government. This kind of government is wonderful. I'm going to vote for it again. You won't get that. People are living in absolute fear and concern, and people are worried. They look left, right, and center and around them many a times. They're constantly worried about their kids, their health, their income. What is SARS going to do? What is the politics going to do? What is the authorities going to do? What's going to happen? Who's going to act and put these guys into jail? Who's going to do this and put the handcuffs on here afterwards? Who's going to step in?
Right.
Who's going to be the new generals?
Well, let's hear
what is the president going to say? How is he going to explain himself out of this? So this is what
interesting that you mentioned the president. Sorry, Mike. I think we're having a bit of a delay in terms of your line. We'll try to clean it up in a short while. But Control, put up that graphic with regards to the quote of Lieutenant General Sabia. I just want to read it to the viewers and get our live audience's take on it. And he says towards the end of his statement, this is Sabia, right? It is my hope that the Commission's findings will assist the President in safeguarding against the use of public funds and state resources for purposes unrelated to the constitutional mandate of the criminal justice system, including the pursuit of personal vendettas, factional interests, or succession battles that are instead deployed solely in furtherance of the constitutional imperatives of accountability, impartiality, and public interest. Thabo, what's your understanding in terms of the argument that Sabia is trying to put forward?
Look, what Sabia is trying to do is to say that, in all fairness, I'm being unfairly accused. In fact, throughout his testimony, he's been saying that. But like I said, he doesn't tell us the reality that South Africans face. And the reality that South Africans face is that for years they've been suspecting that there's rot in the criminal justice system. It's just that they couldn't prove it. And what Madlanga Commission has done is to deep and expose some of the rot, all right? Based at least on the evidence that has been presented by one of them, you know, the General Kumalos, the General Mkwanazis. And that has actually, once the public trust in the criminal justice system is eroded, like the lady has said, it leads to all sorts of anarchy. It leads to all sorts of taking the law into your own hands, people, you know, giving up. In fact, this reminds me of an old joke of the Libile-Lamang phenomenon. Now, the Libile-Lamang phenomenon is an old joke based in Pretoria where a family has lost their son. Case has gone cold and for years. So when they went to go and inquire in the detective, what happened to the investigation to the murder of our son? The detective who was responsible, assigned, searched his cupboard, pulled the docket, dusty docket, which has not been operated or actually handled for years. When he opened that docket, he says, we've been trying to investigate this thing, but let's make things easier. So in other words, who do you suspect? Now, look at what the detective is doing. He's entrusted with the responsibility and with the resources to investigate the murder, but because he couldn't do it, he's now asking the family to do what? To now point who the suspect is. And a lot of people, PH, get arrested. There are many cases before our civil high courts of unlawful and wrongful arrest, where people are arrested purely because there's pressure from the family, there's pressure from society, there's pressure from politicians, there's pressure from society, and police end up acting before thorough investigation as a result of a number of things. But what Madlanga Commission has actually done, this exposure, what it has actually done, it has reaffirmed and confirmed the suspicions that South Africans have held for years, that there are problems there. And the general there and the commission will have to obviously get to the bottom of this and release a report that will actually try to reinstate the public trust on the criminal justice system in its totality.
And I guess the important part is what is at the other side of the equal sign, right? What are the solutions that needs to be found in order to fix
consequence management and accountability.
That's the A word, accountability. Okay, we'll get to that in a short while. We want to know your thoughts as well. What do you think in terms of the testimony from Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya with regards to his testimony before the Madlanga Commission? Did it answer or clarify some of the matters that you had in mind, or did it leave you with more questions than answers? Let us know at SABC News_TV. We'll get more perspective from our live studio audience in a short while. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. We're talking about the Madlanga Commission and in particular Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya's testimony. Look, in general, I'm talking about now, right? In terms of the past couple of months, there's been some alarming allegations. Has the scope, the extent, the veracity of these allegations become more clearer to you watching these testimonies and the cross-examination? Very interesting indeed. Let us know at SABC News_TV. Also, what do you think about the testimony from General Shadrack Sibiya? Let us know at SABC News_TV. Now, let's get back to our live studio audience. Your name and where you're from?
My name is Saurav Maharaj. I am also a fourth-year law student at the University of Johannesburg, and I'm locally from Johannesburg.
So you're watching the testimony in a particular way, from a particular perspective, given your studies, right? What's your big takeaways?
So I concur with both of the people that spoke before me in that it is truly shocking to see the degradation of the trust in these institutions that are entrusted to protect us, number one. And number two, to reference certain journalists, there's been so many contradictions made by the same people. Firstly, by Brown Mokgotsi, we still don't know what he does for the ANC. And now by Shadrack Sibiya, who has made statements that contradict each other in terms of his knowledge and now related to the PKTT, as you alluded to earlier. First, he had control over it, and now he was just following orders. But does that take away from the fact that he still had control over it? Is he trying to divert us from the fact that he had control over it? He knew about it. And it's the same with Brown Mokgotsi. He allegedly worked for the SSA. There's no documentation. There's no employment records. His supposed supervisor left the SSA over 10 years ago. How are these people finding their way into some of the most powerful, influential positions in our country? That is truly the concerning thing.
So lots of questions, and you pointing out some alleged contradictions. So your name and where you from?
My name is Tumisho Ramashilo, and I'm from Limpopo. I'm studying at Wits University doing my honors.
Yeah. What did you make of General Shadrack Sibiya's testimony?
He sounds like a very PR-trained individual. To me, he does not give me the confidence that if he was to step back into his position, some of these problems might be solved. What I've seen from his testimony is a person who's trying to prove himself innocent. And as South Africans, we are not stupid. We see right through them in as much as they look like individuals with big English. They go there and they say, no, but this WhatsApp message was wrong and that was wrong. As South Africans, we already know that there's a problem. And with him and his testimony, I thought he was going to go there and tell us that, okay, with the evidence that has been presented, this is how I have contributed, or this is where I've missed. Yeah. This is where we can improve, which I think would have installed a bit of trust in us as South Africans to say, okay, at least there's a person who, similar to General Ntantla Mkhwanazi, who is determined to be able to take out the rot. Yeah. But for now, I've only seen an individual who wants to prove himself innocent. And as South Africans, we are not buying it.
Yeah. Again, it's the T word, right? Ma'am, do you share the gentleman's sentiment? Your name and where you're from?
Hi, my name is Tembeka Shongwani. I've passed my student days.
You look like you're just getting in there.
I wish. So look, I think Tabo said something about the community, that there's always been suspicions. The community is new. We just couldn't pinpoint, right? So at this point in time, what we're looking at is them coming out. We thank Mklanhla Mkhwanazi for coming out to say, look, what the community has been saying is true. I can pinpoint. So that's what we needed. And looking at Sibiya, he's really playing victim, because all he's saying is that I'm not a social media. Social media influence has made Mkhwanazi the populist man in the police force, because he's using social media to really feed into what he's saying. We can tell that corruption has happened and is happening. We just need to get to the point where we say, when do we hold people accountable, what action is going to be taken, than tiptoeing around it, because as communities we've seen there's different cases. You look at Senzo Meyiwa's case, you look at Bushiri's case, those are the cases that communities have been saying there is a problem within the police force, and how do we now make sure that we can entrust the police force to really look out for the communities.
Taba, there's been names put forward, right? In terms of suggestions for investigation, further investigation. And you get the general sentiment that the public wants action yesterday. Given that, having said that, the public expectations in terms of prosecution versus the realities, the practical realities on the ground, how does those two marry up? Because how do you see it? Let me not put my thoughts. How do you see it panning out in terms of pace of prosecution?
So when the president announced the commission, he outlined a process and timelines. He said there's going to be an interim report and then a final report. And if you would have seen about a few weeks ago, the president announced the setting up of a task team to specifically zoom into some of the evidence that has actually emerged in that document. What that means is an attempt to accelerate, so that you don't necessarily have to wait for the commission to conclude its work. By the way, what we don't know is that as the commissioners are seated there, the three of them, there's a technical team behind them that actually does the report.
Yes.
So, and they just sign off the draft and the correctness of the what you call. So, to make sure that by the time the commission wraps up, so there is a report ready. But now the task team's responsibility is to pursue some of the prosecution-ready evidence. So the prosecution-ready evidence would relate to the first phase of the commission, those that the evidence that has been led, that has not been challenged, and that task team would pick up. And that's why in that statement that the president released a few weeks ago, we would have seen certain names, and we should expect people to appear in court very soon. So now it's moving from a commission to a court of law, where people like Mkhwanazi, like Brian Mokhotsi, like whoever has been implicated, can then go and appear and then present evidence to their defense. It's still going to be technically a bit of a long road, because justice requires that you must allow due process. You must allow people. So what the president will say after this process is that he will plead with South Africans to give this process time and allow the conclusion, the logical conclusion of the law to take its course. And unfortunately, the criminal justice system yields very slowly, but when it does yield, it actually yields and it grinds effectively. That's why there's a saying that there's a so-called long arm of the law, that you would have committed offenses 30 years ago, but there will be a time where you're actually going to have to come and face your answers. I mean, unfortunately, because of the impatience, I really feel bad for the families of the victims of the political killings investigations, because there are people who died there. You know, there's a infamous case of Cindy Somagaga, you know, who was trying to fight corruption. And there are many nameless and families who we don't know about, whose plight depends on the outcomes of this. So the president actually should actually take into account the seriousness and the sensitivities that the South Africans have on this.
Mike, pick it up from there in terms of due process. And people are watching this commission or the ad hoc committee and saying, there's the evidence, go and arrest the person, right? It seems obvious from a viewer or a layman's point of view, but talk to us about the process and what the public can expect in terms of the investigations. Does police, do they start from the evidence presented from the Madlanga Commission, or do they start from scratch in terms of their investigations?
Here's the ideal situation, and then you can all make the deduction if that is the case. If you have a highly, I'm talking fit as a fiddle, extremely well-trained, specialist investigating task team from the police doing these investigations, with a judicial side that has been set aside, that can swiftly and is well trained, because not all judges understand organized crime. You need extremely well-trained judges. Everybody needs to be extremely qualified. These two units, the judicial side and the investigative side, presenting it and quick sentencings and arrestations and the whole process, court process, done quickly, and then sentencing and people putting into jail. Right. That's the ideal situation. Unfortunately, as my friend has said, the judicial system is slow. And we have seen how many specialized units themselves getting involved in corruption.
Right.
And then we must not forget, I previously said, and the line went dead, the president must also be questioned. There's 3 questions we need to ask him. Did he know of any of these generals' moves, what they've done, and who they were involved with? Did he at any time, when he has heard of, if he says he has heard of this, done immediately something about it? And what is he planning to do now if he has known, hasn't done anything about this, about his position into this whole hearing and situation?
Right.
Because the public will only fully and totally trust the authorities in our country if they're beyond reproach and if they're honest and transparent. This is the ideal situation, and this might turn the public to say, yay, we can follow them now. They are honest, open, and transparent.
Yeah. Mike, thanks for that. It puts things into perspective, right? Accountability, transparency, consequence management. That's key. So your name and where you from?
My name is Dominic Selumela, and I just completed my master's in criminal procedure at the great University of Johannesburg, and I hail from Limpopo.
A shameless punt. So talk to us about your observations in terms of the big takeaways for you. What are we learning as a law student? What have you learned from these processes?
Well, what I've learned is that, as Mr. Tawe has said, that, and as other colleagues have also mentioned, that the public has always had questions, has always had suspicions about the effectiveness of a criminal justice system. And I should mention, Blame, that in any criminal justice system, the most important body is actually SABC or the police body, because the prosecutor cannot decide just on their own to prosecute if the investigations and the evidence in the docket does not really guarantee a possible conviction. So what we have seen now is that there is a lot of fraud, a lot of corruption, and a lot of unprocedural behavior in SABS and so forth. And I should also mention, Blaine, that as now the president has actually given directives about the next stage of this commission. What's more important, again, Blaine, going back to my point, is the police that are tasked to investigate so far, right, should actually be the right personnel with the right skills, Blaine, to uncover and unpack possible evidence and admissible evidence, so to say, so that we can actually see faces in court, so that the prosecution can also charge those people based on the docket and based on the investigations that are done by the selected investigators.
You mentioned a key point. Admissible evidence, right? It's what holds up in court. That's what counts. Let's hear from you, sir. Your full name and where you from?
My name is Nauma Tabuchi, and I'm also from the Great University of Johannesburg.
Good. I hope we are picking you up there. Control, let me know if I need to move a bit because we need to see his face. Talk to us about your observations in terms of the big takeaways for you from not only Shadrack Sibiya's testimony, but others as well.
Well, Blade, in general, the proceedings of the Madlanga Commission has attempted to answer to the long-standing question of who will guard the guardians. Yeah. But at the same time, what I found interesting was when he was alleging flaws in the search and seizure proceedings, right, conducted against him, right, in that they were procedurally defective, right. The question then becomes, what is as good as the Commission of Inquiry if due procedural considerations will not be pronounced, because if such recommendations does actually reach the stage of prosecution, right, there is the so-called, exclusionary rules as encapsulated in Section 35, subsection 5 of the Constitution, which then says that evidence obtained in a manner that undermines the rights in the Bill of Rights has to be excluded, right? So what is as good as the recommendations if due procedural considerations will not be pronounced?
Who guards the guardians? It's an important question. Let me go to my right-hand side. Ma'am, your name and where you from?
My name is Amrala Nchokwe, and I'm from Vets, and I come from Limpopo.
Right. And talk to us about your impressions. How do you think Shadrack Sibiya held up in terms of his testimony and under cross-examination?
I think there was a lot of contradictions and a lack of accountability, and also we don't have a lot of trust in him right now. It's a thing of like we need them to restore that trust in us as the public as well. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get this lady's comment. Your name and where you from?
Good evening, South Africa. My name is Angelique Mafaza, and I am from the Harvard of Africa, otherwise known as Wits University.
Yeah, and your thoughts in terms of the testimony?
I think the testimony was nowhere near clarifying matters. In fact, it deepened concerns about accountability within police senior leadership.
Yeah.
Because we are seeing here someone who is consistently relying on having been procedurally correct, but then eventually he considered to say no, the decision was his. The document that he kept relying on didn't actually give a mandate to disband the PKTT.
Right.
And he also included a lot of internal disputes within the SAPS leadership, which has nothing to do with us, honestly, because what we want to know here is what happened and to get justice for the victims.
Right.
We also saw emotional accountability, just to say that he's feeling oppressed. That has nothing to do with us. He is an authority figure who has been trusted not just to protect the victims who have already been victimized by this ordeal, the entire South Africa. So now he has to come in with institutional accountability, but instead he just keeps deflecting. And that's not fair. He just left us with more questions than answers. But I do hope that as is being slow cooked in the commission, he will eventually give us the answers we need.
Slow cooked. Angelique, thank you very much for your thoughts. I wonder, Thabo, and this is for you, we'll get your thoughts after the break. The line of questioning from not only the commissioners, the chair, as well as the evidence leader, is it getting us to that place where it gives us a clearer picture, especially during the cross-examinations? We'll get your thoughts next. Also, please send us your thoughts at SABC News_TV. More talk, more discussion next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. We're trying to pick apart the Madlanga Commission, especially testimony heard recently from Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya. Live studio audience. I want to get to our legal analyst, Thabo. Thabo, with regards to the questioning, the line of questioning, especially from the commissioner, from the chair, as well as the evidence leader. I wonder, and sometimes, and this is just watching from a layman's point of view, you kind of think that seemingly the commissioners or the chair might be agitated by certain answers. How do you strike a balance in terms of controlling that agitation while maintaining or portraying legal decorum? How do you strike that balance?
So, by his own very admission, General Sibiya said, I know, just to quote him, I know when a chairperson looks at me like this, it means I'm in hot water or I'm in trouble. So, look, the commission, unlike a court, is not an accusatorial. It's an inquisitorial. So, in other words, it's inquiry.
Yeah.
So, it's a fact establishing. So, look at how they've, and by the way, big ups to the commissioners. They show you that they read. Eh? There's a lot of reading going into that PH, and they show you that on paragraph so and so you said this and that. How do you reconcile that and that? And I think that's good for the credibility of the outcome. But I must mention something about these phase 2 witnesses. Phase 2 witnesses are those that against whom the allegations have been made. Right. Their demeanor, body language. Someone went there and finished 5 bottles of water at some point. Their demeanor and their body language left much to be desired. You know, there's something about the truth that you can't escape.
And you think that carries weight in terms of the commission or in public opinion, I guess?
In a court of public opinion, one, but also in the mannerism and the manner in which the commissioners have approached.
Right.
And quite frankly, they've really demonstrated a professional, ethical leadership, in a sense that even at the stroke of being provoked by inconsistencies, at the stroke of being irritated, they kept calm.
Right.
And they were consistent in the manner in which they questioned. They asked what is called a rationality-based question, reasonable questions, logical-based question. You know, if you look at how they approach this, but general, isn't it a probable thing or a logical thing to do when you do 1, 2, 3? So that tells you, and I know I've seen a lot of people saying, but this commission has already made up its mind. All right? Actually, to use General Sibiya's words, he said, but we are accepting the version of Mkwanazi and Kumalo as gospel truth. They said, no, we're not doing that. There's evidence placed before us. You bring in your own side of the story. We do what is called the reconciliation. How does that reconcile itself so that we can arrive at what is called the logical conclusion? Yes, I'm quite impressed at the manner in which the commissioners have actually, you know, handled themselves, you know, even at the, like I said, at the risk of provocation, they have actually still demonstrated calmness and professional ethics.
Right. And Advocate Boloy did clarify that when she says assume that this is in a certain way ABC, it doesn't mean that she believes that that is the case. It's just putting it to the witness. Tabo, thanks for that. Let's get some questions. I know there's a few questions. Your questions?
I just wanted to get your opinion on what you think of the overall image that the commission is portraying, because we are now asking specialized teams like the Hawks, or previously would have been an extremely capable branch such as the Scorpions, to investigate these extremely high-profile, generally white-collar corruption, bribery, less sort of violent crimes, but more sort of technical aspects of crime. Who are we going to ask to investigate this when the very people that are supposed to be investigating these types of things, or that are in charge of those who do investigate, are the ones sitting in the commission?
Right. Tabo, let's get your answer, and one Mike, your answer as well.
That is why we have what is called a watchdog called IPET, whose responsibility it is to actually guard the guardian. But there's another technical question, and I think this commission has also exposed that there are allegations that even within IPET, there's been infiltration. So in other words, who investigate IPET? It's going to be about investigation. But at the end of the day, what is important is that the public need to see that justice is done. And remember, justice delayed is justice denied.
Right. Mike?
Yeah, you see, this is the greatest problem now, because I'm happy with how things go now. And I've explained exactly how everybody that wanted to prove themselves innocent, how they should have acted. So in my opinion, the second phase, the investigation phase, is going to either bring us absolute justice or not. Because I ask once again, are those that have been handpicked, are they qualified? Are they fit as a fiddle? Are they fully trained? Can they put the cuffs on? Or are they going to be influenced? Or is this certain things going to be swept under the carpet? Could there be nepotism? Could there be bribes? Could there be threats, intimidation, or even killings to prevent this? Because we're looking at enormous racketeering and organized crime, the biggest South Africa has ever seen. And you need a real MacGyver Rambo team to sort this.
Let's get maybe one more question. Let's get your question, ma'am.
Okay, so I have a question for my brother over there in relation to what General Sibiya had stated in his testimony. That I think it was Friday, if I'm not mistaken, in relation to the 121 dockets and whether or not he was authorized to take the dockets from KZN to Pretoria. So I wanted to get your opinion. In an instance whereby they established that he did not have the authority to act, and that the action that was taken in relation to the dockets being taken from KZN to Pretoria, what do you think might be the outcome in relation to who might be blamed? Because according to General Sibiya, he blames General Mkhwanazi for refusing to accept back the dockets after they had undergone an inspection in Pretoria, whereas others are saying that he might be the one who might be blamed. According to TikTok comments, he might be the one who might be blamed because of the fact that the investigation could have happened in KZN. There was no need for the dockets to be taken from KZN to Pretoria just for a mere investigation. And others are saying that it goes beyond just genuine auditing. It's more of like it was a delay of justice within those dockets and the political killing aspect and everything.
Oh, Brother Tabo, I guess it's speculative, but give it a shot.
It's speculative, but remember, the whereabouts, how abouts, who abouts of the dockets, it's neither here nor there. It's just mainly to establish the corroboration. Just remember, a few steps back, there are allegations on the 6th of July that the criminal justice system is infiltrated through the police by those who are implicated. Then in response, what does the president do? It set up a commission of inquiry to establish whether or not there's criminality in the criminal justice system. Now, all these things happen to check whether or not, as a result of the behavior of those who are highly entrusted with these dockets and with the arrest or search warrants, can those allegations be proved? Like I said when I opened, that does not have to happen on a beyond any reasonable doubt, evidentiary proof, even merely on the balance of probabilities, it's enough. So this is just to establish whether or not through the behavior and how, whether someone did a PLL, a PBL, or did what, that's neither here nor there. But somebody is trying to establish here that I am not the only one. Right. These people who came here to claim that they are innocent, they are actually also implicated. That's a sense that he was trying to do.
All right. Let's get one more comment. Your name and where you're from?
Good day. My name is Ntatleni Mashudu and I'm from the Great University of Johannesburg. I stay in Limpopo. Right now with this commission of inquiry, we are dealing with a very sensitive issue, if I could put it like that, because not only are we dealing with the investigation, but we are dealing with some certain of cases where you're investigating the same people that are there to investigate. It makes it really difficult for them to find the truth, but South Africans are patient for this. It's some of the things that we've been really waiting for, because we can see that something is happening between the criminal justice system, something is happening between the SAPS. In this matter, you find the top position people that are holding the certain position being the ones to be involved in some certain crimes like this. Yeah. You know, it's really bad and it's really effective to the country when you look at how corruption is being normalized in this country, how corruption is being taken as something which, if you want to get to certain places, you have to do corruption. Right now, when you look at the commission, the witnesses that comes over there, they just give nonsensical answers to the question that they're being asked. And let's just hope that actually the truth will come out and then we can deal with corruption effectively.
I guess the big takeaway in terms of words for today is truth, trust, accountability, and consequences, right? Tabo, thank you very much indeed for your time. We run out of time. Mike as well, appreciate your expertise on the matter as well as our live audience, value added, no doubt. And no doubt it's going to be interesting times as these commissions progress, but we'd like to see the outcomes as well. Thank you very much indeed. All right, before we go, here's my take. We heard during the third quarter crime stats presser that most organized crime is not recorded in the crime stats, right? Most extortion of small businesses is not reported to the police, nor is most corruption and fraud in the public and private sector. So, if it's not being reported, how do we get to that better place as a country, right? The consequences can be devastating. Let me give you some practical examples. And this was in that crime stats statement. At a local level, organized corruption in tendering and the copper cable theft syndicates contribute to water and electricity outages that place havoc in people's lives. The quality of crucial public services such as education, health, care, transport, it's all undermined when public funds allocated for these services are stolen. These are real world consequences. And again, it's one thing to be on the right side of an issue. It's another to actually do something about it. We have to ask ourselves what really matters. What are these hearings telling us that are preventing us from being the best version of ourselves? What is it telling us about the country that we're living in? The country that our children are growing up in? The country that our children are inheriting? Things will only get better if we pay attention to it. And consequences, right, are in part a function of speed of process. So the refrain should be, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube as well as SABC Plus. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. I'll wrap Africa up next. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.